Okay. Certainly, Dr. Poppy Thornton's quite enthusiastic and passionate about this. How did the definition of social entrepreneurship change? What did she say? Who can answer that?
I can try answering it.
Thank
So
you.
basically it went from like a business, like social entrepreneurship turned into like this business oriented field of like, oh, there's a social problem, yes, but like let's see how we can monopolize on it. Even if we're helping the social problem, like it's still like the whole business structure is to like make money, even if you're donating back, rather than a system change leader, which is kind of where it should have been, which is recognizing that there's a social problem and going at any length to systematically change it and like make it better for the next generation is kind of like what I got from it.
If you were going to create a for-profit business, right, you're going to sell phones or cars or detergent, right? Your goal, and one of the questions that you would be asked over and over again is, what is your market share? How fast can you go to scale? And how big can you get? So if we were to take the small circle, big circle model for selling detergent, very often that works, right? But if we were to ask that question on a social problem, the way that you go to scale is changing the system, right? So in some respects, the goal is the same, but understanding that in most cases, in order to get to scale, to create that big change, you have to do it a different way. Let me ask a question of all of you. Six of you have had meetings with six of the groups have had meetings with their key stakeholder. And so let me ask this question, and you can just raise your hands. Of all of those meetings, has your key stakeholder, which of your key stakeholders have described a broken system? Go ahead and raise your hands, right? I can think of probably without question 5 of the 6 and maybe even the 6th. There's a broken system. Those of you that are doing ODTL, is there a broken system there?
Now I think about it, yes, I think there is, because as we all have learned over the past year, Loyola's online learning system is not necessarily where students or faculty want it to be.
And I appreciate you picking that, the 3 of you picking that up. Thanks, Grace, in doing that, right? So your question isn't to fix a system, but the reason that you have a question is because the system is broken, right? And those of us that have been working in ODTL, the reason that there is an ODTL is because Loyola is so far behind, has been so far behind historically in that. And will any of you create a product that will generate money from it over this semester? The answer to that is no. You're not going to come up with a proprietary way to get people to go to the writing center, right? That's not going to happen. But there's going to be a big impact, right? The other question that I have for you is, how could it be awkward for you to share an identical mission with another group on campus? What would be awkward about that? Or how would that be awkward or inefficient? What do you think? Sienna, what are some of the dangers of doing that? Why would that be awkward?
Because then you'd be collecting like the same data twice instead of like using your resources. One person can do like one area, another person can do another area, so like cover more ground.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. I mean, why spend limited resources to do the same thing, as opposed to, a summation or a complement to what other folks are doing, true complement of what other folks are doing, right? And that makes a lot of sense, right? Those of you that had the meeting with Dr. Carlucci about STEM, right? When she talked about all of these groups that are addressing this issue, and none of them know what anybody is doing. And how's that problem going? It hasn't changed, right? So that's another place when you're looking at your place in a network and not having to create something new. for a long time, I've had a number of people, and even in my role here at Loyola, I've said, hey, I'd like to create a nonprofit to do something. And my first question is always, who else is doing that? Because creating a nonprofit is hard, right? Putting together the business, getting it through the IRS, all of those things, it's hard. Could you better spend your time and talent contributing to an effort that's already going on? Maybe not, right? Maybe not, but you could. Is there still a role for nonprofits and social ventures to exist? What do you think? And what would that role be? What would the role be?
I think a lot of times like nonprofits provide immediate relief, but aren't addressing a system entirely. So like immediate relief for many issues is definitely needed, but they don't have the time or sometimes the resources to look at the larger scale of the issue that they're like impacting at the moment.
Yeah, they can be a tool, right? They can certainly be a tool along the way. And I'll give you another hint here, right? When you sign up for a nonprofit, a 501c3, right? So people that give you contributions, they're tax deductible, right? And you have to, one of the criteria is you have to determine how it is that you're contributing to the public good. But this is the thing, you can't be political. So a nonprofit, by the nature of the way that they're set up, can't be political in a partisan way. They can still do advocacy, but that is a very thin line that you cannot cross, right? So there's almost a disincentive to having some types of nonprofits being able to engage in the systematic work, right? There are ways you can get around with the tax code, 501c4, those of you that have been involved, yes. But it's difficult. You can't like support candidates that, you know, share your vision. You can't do it, right? So,
Imagine.
If we change our definition and we start to view this now as social entrepreneurship, we think of all of these pieces that we have discussed in the past. And as Carolyn mentioned, yes, there is a place for these, maybe a shorter term, a more local role for these. But you don't want, we might not need another way to communicate, another Twitter site, or an event that raises money for, or activity, or another nonprofit or social venture that does something else, or that has to solve the whole problem. My sense is that a lot of the folks that go into this anyway, even though there are other folks doing it, fall into this category that Dr. Poppy Thornton talks about, which is called heropreneurship. Like they're doing it because they want to come in and they want to be the change. They don't want to necessarily be part of that network and collaborate with other folks. And so if our definition of social entrepreneurship now evolves to addressing a social need by taking limited resources to create more value by shifting a broken system, that's not to say that things like courage to do that are not important. I can assure you that speaking out in an advocacy or political way very often requires more courage than if there's just money involved, right? So that's still important. And certainly we have an opportunity to address things like value, right? We've talked about value in the class, right? We started to have that conversation last week. And I don't want to say that all of these things are bad, but they are tools that you can use on the way to creating that systematic change. So if we were to make a synonym of system and we were to call it by shifting broken structures, right? What systems or structures have we seen and talked about in the last couple of weeks? What are they? If we had to categorize them. Somebody who hasn't spoken up today. What are some of the systems that we've been addressing or talking about?
we have been addressing the economic, political, social, and cultural structures.
Yeah, all right, so those are some structures. So if we want to make economic change or political change, right, we can do that. Or structural, or excuse me, cultural change. We have an opportunity to do that, right? So these are the structures that we're dealing with. And in fact, not only can we look at this from a perspective of power structures, right? But think about this whole idea, creating more value. That means that you need more value than is actually there, right? And that gets us into this whole idea of power sharing, right? So what are the resources we have to get what we want, right? Big ticket items like equality and justice, right? We might not be able to address those all on our own. So we will need other folks to come to the table to build enough resources to get that systematic change. And we talked about, political, right? Making a political change. One of the resources that a lot of groups have, people, right? We're getting ready to vote, right? And please do. A lot of the states, my dad and I have already voted, right? So if you can absentee ballot, do it. Get out and vote. That's a way that we can change a structure or a system, right? We can pool our resources. But again, thinking about last week's conversation, where how crucial those resources are, we don't want to be squandering them and creating the same effort that somebody else is already doing. So as you saw, and this talk would, the reason that I didn't give you the entire TED Talk was because a lot of the TED Talk was about how we teach and not necessarily the impact gap analysis. Her talk on impact gap, you have seen, right? And so there's this idea, this entrepreneurial mindset that you still use that starts with a challenge and understanding everything you can about the challenge. And then once you do that, to start to look and see what solutions have been used. Those of you that have done a lot of work, I know CCSJ does this, but a lot of community work, one of the first things that you do is you map your community, right? You identify the resources that are available, where the power structures are, what the pain points are. You go out and map. This is what we're doing in a number of areas. So the first thing we're mapping is the challenge. Then we're seeing what solutions are already out there, have already been tried, and what's working or what might be available. It's only at that point that we start to identify where our contribution might be. We could decide, or a user could say, and this happened earlier today, those of you that were in the Writing Center, our priority is, that's pretty unambiguous. What we really need is, what's missing is, right? So these things all develop from your interactions with your users, right? And so there are guiding questions that you would ask that would lead you to this map, right? And we start with the challenge, we go to the solution, and based on what we understand, we start to determine where the impact can be. Notice that we have not, even in these 3 steps and all of these questions that we're going to answer, we have not yet talked about our solution, how we're going to solve the problem. We've known as much as possible about the challenge. We've understood as much as possible about what else is going on, and we've identified the holes. We have not put forth a hypothesis, idea, or solution that we're thinking about using. Okay. So rather than just kind of jumping in, I want to kind of bring this back to the process that we're going through, right? So last week, and when we first started out, one of the first things that I asked you to do is like, hey, we're getting this new idea. I need you to put a plan together, right? Because you need to have a plan that's going to guide this initial work. So when you get that challenge question and you assemble your team, you probably don't know a lot about it yet, right? You have to know a few things before you can start answering these guiding questions for the challenge, right? So you have set up your project plan. So your starting point, as it will be all the time, writing down the challenge or opportunity for your group. What research do you need to do? Again, pooling your resources, making sure not everybody is doing the same thing. And then as you start to have your meetings, you start to get some more information. For instance, who would your target audience be? Right? That's been a topic in a number of the meetings that we've had with your key stakeholders. Who is your target audience? Because that's going to help direct this next step that we're going to go through is who else do you need to talk to? Okay. And on the back side of the sheet, I asked you, and those of you that have had the interviews now understand the value of having those questions written down, either because you have a really enthusiastic key contact, like Dr. Carlucci, who if you just give her 15 minutes, she'll answer most of your questions without them being asked. Or you might have somebody like Dr. Medvecki, who's not really sure exactly. There's a number of things that they need help with, right? And so you have your questions going in so that you can kind of focus and get what you need out of that brief interaction so that you can move forward. Okay, so it's important that we have this initial list of key contacts and the questions. And those questions in the beginning are going to be more focused on process, curiosity, what people are passionate about, what has happened, right? Not about solutions, except for solutions that may have already been tried and what you might learn from them. And then now knowing, since you've been through this process, that we're going to get a lot of data, understanding too, where you're going to have all this written down. Right? So that as we move through this, the challenge mapping is first, the solutions mapping is, that went the wrong way. The solutions mapping is second, and the impact gaps is third. Sorry for that. So I want to check in as I'll do from time to time, because these parts move somewhat quickly, and I'm giving you a lot of documents, and I understand that. One of the reasons for that is I want to be very clear as to what the expectations are and the kind of things that you should be getting. But I also understand that I don't have a chance to come by and visit your table with all three of you sitting there at the same time and have this conversation, and you don't have the opportunity to do that either. So in providing these documents as templates, if nothing else, I'm providing a common place for you to collect your ideas and continue the work, understanding that we're all doing this from different places. So last week, we started this conversation about framing your challenge and building your team, right? That was week 5. This is week 6. You've created your project plan. I'm going to collect those on Saturday. You started recruiting people for your initial interviews, right? Or even your subsequent interviews. And you're starting to define your audience as your challenge continues to evolve and be framed, right? That question that you started with was a question that I arranged with the key contact before you met with them, right? It's pretty broad. But now that you have had a lot of these meetings and there may be 8 or 9 things that you can work on, how does that challenge question change? So just about every one of these steps, I'm going to ask you that. And this week and in lab, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about the impact gap canvas, focus your secondary research and your interviews. Again, the secondary research and the interviews, those don't change. Those are going to inform those steps of the impact gap canvas. And we're going to be working on those over the next couple of weeks. So what I want you to see is that there's a pattern here. We introduce a concept. There's a document or something that you can start to work on. You have a chance to work on it, and then in the next week get feedback on it or present it, and then you submit it. And we just keep going through that process. So right now we're working on the project plan. That's going to be submitted Saturday. Today I'm introducing the impact gap canvas. You're going to have a chance to work on it. Next week, I'll have a chance to get feedback on it and continue to have it evolve, and then you'll be turning it in on the 17th. And that's the way this is going to go. And in some cases, there'll be presentations. Like the next presentation will be the idea canvas in 3 weeks, right? So all of these pieces are going together. If you skip them, if you don't have an opportunity to meet and do the work, you're going to miss out on the most valuable thing that we have, I think, and that's the class time and the lab time where you are all together, getting feedback from each other and me, and being able to make the work go forward, right? And just kind of keeping up with the process. So immediately on Saturday night, this project plan is going to be done. So to do that, you have to complete your key contact to get some of the information. You're going to have some initial interviews and secondary research, and you're going to submit that. We're going to start today working on the challenge mapping. I put together a worksheet for you that will help you answer these questions, and I tried to tailor the questions in the worksheet so that they would apply to your projects, right? And there would be a way for you to be able to fill these things in as you're moving along. And then starting to go through the process of the interviews and asking questions, defining your unknowns, experimenting, getting answers to your unknowns, and moving along, right? And so on the 17th, I'm going to collect your impact gap canvas, and then the part of the worksheet where you're identifying your unknowns and turning those into questions that you're going to ask or at that point have asked. Okay? This will be the crux of our work in lab today and tomorrow. I wanted to bring in a couple points. Again, you've seen expert interview before. This is directly out of the IDEO text, right? So that key contact, for the most part, that's an expert interview, right? And I wanted to point out a couple of things in this that, you know, if you don't go into it in detail, you may miss, right, as to how all this fits together, right? So the expert interview are with experts so that they can give you a systems level view of your project area. So if I wanted to make a systems level change, they would probably be a good person to talk to. They're going to tell you about recent innovations, successes and failures, right? So you can ask those people questions directly about the different pieces of that impact gap analysis that you have to fill out, and offer the perspectives of organizations like banks, governments, and NGOs who also might be doing this work to give you an idea of what's going to go on. There's not a lot of banks and NGOs doing work at Loyola, but there are other faculty organizations, student organizations that are doing this work that might help define where you can fill a gap and make an impact, right? So this is the purpose of that interview. It's also, and you're not going to get to these questions, you're not going to get these things answered if you don't have the questions set up to get them, right, to get those answers. Okay. A couple key points here. You might want to give them a heads up on the type of questions you'll be asking. That's kind of good form, even if we were doing feedback, right? So that shouldn't be unusual. I have done that, right? So you'll see in those meeting invites that I've set up in the text part, it kind of gives an idea of what we're looking to, right? And I've also already talked to them. Choosing experts with various points of view. Ask smart research questions. Though you should come prepared with an idea of what you'd like to learn, make sure your game plan is flexible enough to allow you to pursue unexpected lines of inquiry. I've always felt like I'm able to adapt a lot better if I have a sound foundation from where I start. Whether I'm planning an event and then it rains, or whether I'm planning an interview and then we go into a direction that I don't foresee. I'm better equipped to do that if I have a really firm idea and a foundation of how I'm going to act, right? And I can't, like, we have such, you have such an advantage here, and it's so unobtrusive. When you're Zooming with people, record these things. right? Just do it, right? And it's so much easier. Like if I was going to somebody's office or somebody's home or, you know, a church basement and I was doing this, it's kind of awkward. Hey, can I record this? Right? That's an awkward piece for some people, but here it's accepted. So just do it. And you have that. You're going to establish a place where you can keep these things and you can go back, but still take notes, right? Still take notes. Okay. I want to take a step back to talk about it. And again, I recognize user-centered design is a complete change in mindset for a lot of you. And in a lot of cases, that's our fault because we teach and we want solutions as quickly as possible, right? And so I just want to take a step and talk about some of the differences here and how you can really kind of start to break yourself out of the solution-centered and get into more of an idea-centered mindset. This is a natural solving process. Like for us to be given a problem, we want to solve it. In fact, there's like tests and things that evaluate your intelligence or your ability to participate in a certain activity or go to a school. We want the SATs. How fast can you come up with answers, right? A solutions mindset, you're trying to find a solution for a problem. If only we could identify the problem, we could come up with a good solution. But when you have a solution for a problem, you are only thinking about one thing. You cannot be more reductive than that, other than thinking about nothing. Right? You're making choices early on. Well, when you're making choices, you're prioritizing. And if you choose one thing, you're choosing not to do something else. Again, very reductive. You're shutting off other possibilities. The priority here is on the solver, who is you, or the solution. Conversely, ideas is an expansive process, right? And we know this is much more uncomfortable and frustrating because you have to sit there and not give the first solution that comes to your head or suggest things, right? You have to sit in the problem. The challenge mapping is another way of saying you have to learn as much as you can about the problem, right? It's your opportunity to do that. You have to stay in that problem space. You have to resist the urge to do what is socially accepted and usual, which is to agree, add to, tell a story about you, right? Share an experience, right? Our whole goal in these conversations is to consider the user's needs and values, address their pain points. It doesn't mean that you can't talk, but you are looking for clarification, trying to get more of what they think, trying to get them to expand, understanding underlying issues, right? This is where empathy is really important. What is that user's full experience like? This is our challenge. This is hard, right? So, hey, are we going to build our own company in this class? Like, no, but we're going to have an entrepreneurial, user-centered mindset. The reason that this is so important is because it's so applicable to so many things that you do. But it's so unlike most of the ways that you've been rewarded for doing the things you've done in the past. And I understand that, right? I understand that. So these are some solutions. These have actually happened in this course, right? An app to connect artists from Baltimore area colleges. This is one of the proposals for a project that we had. So already there was a solution in mind, right? A campus farmers market for students with food insecurity, right? The emphasis there is we're creating a farmers market, not understanding why students are food insecure, right? If we're thinking about the solution, are we going to be thinking about the systematic change that has to happen, right? A bus to bring students to the city and to Towson. So we're thinking about, okay, so how are we going to run a shuttle bus? I've never done that. I've done it for events, but not to say we're doing. But really, I need to know what the student's pain point is, right? As opposed to the question, which is student artists do not have an easy way to collaborate. How do we address that? Because then I can assure you that the idea was great that they came up with. It had nothing to do with an app. Some students on campus do not get enough to eat. That's the problem. Wouldn't you love to solve that and make sure that systematically there were things in place where that didn't happen, as opposed to having a farmer's market on Tuesday, which would be nice? Students have a difficult time accessing experiences off campus. Well, okay, well, where are they? Because if we go to this solution, apparently those experiences are only in Towson and Federal Hill or downtown somewhere, right? When you're focusing your interview, remember, this is the interviewer's time to connect, set intentions, and passion. That's in the introduction. That's where you connect. That's where you share that passion and you do the small talk that builds trust up front. But your goal, remember, is a 360-degree view of the user's experience. That means that they have to be talking most of the time, right? The user's stories, the user's experience, the user's ideas, the user's frustration and pain points. In that, it's your job, the interviewer's job, to ask for information, clarity, and to make sure that there's mutual understanding. So I heard you say, it sounds like you're saying, that's it. If you're saying, I think I did, that is now about you, right? Even if you're being supportive, right? You're right on the right track. That's a great idea. Oh, I know other people that have done that and had great success with that. Think about it. Judgment goes both ways, right? We all want to be in a judgment-free environment because we don't want negative judgment. But if you're positively judging, that means that you're putting yourself in a position to judge them. Think of that power dynamic. You are putting yourself on top of or in a position to judge, which is the problem, right? You also have to understand that if you are agreeing with people or you are giving stories, most people's inclination is to say agreeable things, right? We know this, right? It's election season and you hear about all this polling. Well, I will tell you right now that we know this because if a white person does a phone poll to an African-American household, we know that the African-American household has about an 8 to 10% factor of answering the questions the way that they think the white pollster wants to hear them. So we get around that by making sure that we have African-American interviewers asking African-Americans the questions, right? So you can't lead somebody even by being positive, right? And when you are making your statements, you hopefully unconsciously introduce your own bias, or if you talk about your solutions, reductive thinking. So in a 30-minute interview, most of the talking, 75% should be listening, and 25% should be talking, and probably most of that should be up front. So just a guideline to go by, right? Doesn't mean you can't ask questions. You shouldn't be answering them, right? One other thing, and we've talked about this premise, and then we'll go. Asking, what do you need to know? Who is the focus? And I'm going to get into this difference between surveys and interviews. A lot of people say, hey, we need to get in information. We want to do a survey. I'll get into this in lab. For lab today, I need an up-to-date project planning worksheet. We're going to start with feedback on that. So I have that taken care of. The preliminary findings from your initial interviews and key contacts interaction, that can just be the notes that you took, right? I'm not looking for something formal. I know a bunch of you just did these today, but you've had your interviews, you've talked to these people, and you've taken notes, and in most cases, I've talked to you after them. And before lab today, before you end, I need you to tell me a date where your team is going to meet, a date and time that your team is going to meet this week. So I'm sorry we ran a couple minutes over. I will see the next group in about 25 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Lab today is at what time?
4:20. And can I see the minor group, the African and African American Studies minor group? How y'all doing?
Good.
How's your project coming?
It's okay. We got the project planning, like we're working on that. We just have to finish sending the emails.
Who are you sending emails to?
I sent the email to Dr. Fenner this morning
Why?
because I wanted to make sure we could talk to her before tomorrow.
Okay, so I need to ask a couple questions here, right? Because good communication means that there's mutual understanding and it's a two-way piece. What have the instructions been? What has been your understanding of the instructions over the last week for how this is supposed to go? So what was the first thing that I needed from you guys? Tony, are you there?
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
So what's the first thing that I needed from you guys?
Was the project planning sheet that we had to fill out?
No, even before that.
We have to just set up like a time to talk with you.
Well, I needed the times that you were available to be able to get with Dr. Fenner, right?
Yeah.
And I've sent a number of you individual emails and a number of group emails, and I still don't know those. Because what's really awkward, and Hassan, I appreciate your enthusiasm and your initiative here, but what's really important is that at least two of you and me are in that meeting with Dr. Fenner so that we can have this initial discussion of what the project is going to be, right? That's my understanding with her, who set it up, and my intention was to make that very clear to you. So you can see as we're getting ready for the lab today and tomorrow that most of what you're going to be doing in lab is based on the conversation that you've had with her, that you've still not had.
Mm-hmm.
So when I ask the question that many times, and this is why I'm having this conversation with you guys, is that my first thought is, have I not been clear as to how this is supposed to go? Because I haven't heard back anything. And so my first thing is I'm really worried that you're going to get so far behind right off the bat that this, which is pretty challenging, I'm asking you to do a lot of stuff, is going to be even more challenging.
Well, if I'm being honest, I was slightly confused because with the mix up of what group that I was particularly going to be in, because at first it was, excuse me, I picked this group and then I was thinking I was going to be in the Salinger group. So it was just slightly confusing and like a mix up, and then finding time to meet up with everybody along with like classes. And I did have like a few midterms to take last week. So that was a little bit of it. Hassan definitely did take a lead, which I was very thankful for. But it was that was like the only thing, was just like the mix up and figuring out what exact group I was going to be in to begin with. So that was my.
And so just to be clear, what was your impression or your understanding of when that was reconciled? At what point did you know what group you were in definitively?
That was on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe. Was it Tuesday?
Tuesday, we had lab, right?
Tuesday, yeah.
Okay, so it was Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so the first question was, and again, I do this way, my biggest fear as your instructor is that I'm not putting you in a situation to succeed.
Yeah.
I'm asking a lot, right? So my biggest fear is that you're going to be out there and not have an opportunity to meet with this key stakeholder who really wants your help. That's going to provide what I think is a really good opportunity for you.
Yeah.
So your takeaway, it sounds like, was we had to come up with a time where we could all meet. All I asked for were, give me some windows of time that we might be able to set this up. And so please understand how I'm in a position where I'm in a little bit of control here because I need to hand off the relationship.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not going to be in this position the whole time.
Yeah, of course.
So I still have not heard from anybody in your group as to when you can meet with Dr. Fenner. So I don't know if you're meeting. I don't know if you're working on your project plan. I don't know any of that stuff. So I understand, Tony, that you need some clarification.
Yeah.
But understand too that the appropriate way to deal with that is to email me.
Yeah, of course.
or to respond to the specific emails that I sent. Right? And I think that, you know, I tried to have the conversation with you. So again, there's two people in that interaction. So if I wasn't clear, that's on me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. Because other than the three of you, the person that wants you to succeed the most is me.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I want. I want you to have a great experience. I want you to like this. I really do. Because if you don't, I mean, raise your hand if you've been through BA 210 with groups that have had a miserable experience. Right? I'm the only one.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks for me too. Right? So I really, really want this to work for you. And I really, really want to help Dr. Fenner. And I know that you really want to do this.
Yeah.
So I need a set of time. So when you interviewed Asan, what did you hear back?
She hasn't answered me yet, but I have a question. So when we meet her, do we have to have questions ready for her?
Yes, you do. Which means that you had to get together and put together questions for the second part that Tony brought up, which is the project plan.
Because
Just
I do
coming
have
up
some.
with questions to be able to ask her. It could be like 5. That's all you're going to have time to ask. Right? And you've asked them, you know them. I mean, it's like, hey, who else is working on this? What have you tried in the past? What's your goal? I mean, they don't have to be, you know, riveting Chris
Sure.
Wallace debate level questions, right? I mean, they could be general questions.
Okay.
The other question that I have to ask the three of you is if scheduling is an issue for the three of you, and again, scheduling is an issue with all the groups. The problem is that if scheduling is an issue with everybody in the group won't work. If scheduling is an issue with one person in the group, that'll work because I don't need, at no point does everybody have to be at everything.
Yeah.
My question is, will this group work? Because if it won't, that's totally cool. And that's totally fine. We've got some other things for you that I think will be great experiences that'll really touch on some things that you're interested in. But if it's not going to work, that's fine. Let's figure it out now to do that. Because everybody's busy.
Yeah, well, I definitely still want to make this work. I'm fine with, like, we could, like, right now schedule times that we could meet. If I don't know if Asan and Liam are okay with that right now, if you guys are able to do that.
If we're able to.
Meet up. Okay, perfect.
Okay. So the other piece too, and Asan, I have to chip in here from Dr. Fenner. One of the reasons you may not have heard back from her is she might be teaching, but she's also expecting to hear from me, right? So just, again, I appreciate your initiative and kind of your internal clock is going, it's like, hey, we got class coming up. We should probably get moving on this. So I appreciate that, right? But she might have been listening, looking for my email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk out because usually about this time of day, my dad's asking me what our plan for dinner is going to be. So I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to come back and then you guys can let me know when you're going to meet.
Okay, perfect.
When you did, I don't even know when you're going to meet. Just give me a block of times.
Okay.
Because this meeting with her is going to be half an hour. So just give me a couple times that 2 of you can, 2 or 3 of you can be there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good.
No problem. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so Mondays are like my only difficult day, right? Probably.
Okay.
But,
So-
any other day works.
Okay. I could do. Can anybody do any point this week or no?
Depends on
Any point after 12, I can. I have class before.
Okay. Thursday and Friday I work, but I am free after 3 o'clock Thursday, and I'm free after 5:30ish Friday. So what times work best for you guys in that regard? We could do, or Wednesday. Tuesday I definitely could do. Tomorrow I could do. And Wednesday I could do before 6:30.
Wednesday, I don't have class.
Okay, so that's good.
On Wednesday, if
What about you, Hassan? I don't know, because it'd be ideal if we all could do it, but if obviously some can't, that's just like, let me just make sure what time I'm good on Wednesday. Okay. Yeah, so Wednesday I could do like right after 3 o'clock-ish.
yeah, it works for me.
Hassan, does that work for you?
I'm checking.
Okay, no problem. You're good.
I'm taking 6 classes, so like I have to like.
No, you're good. We promise. And of course, remember, he said that not everybody has to be there, but I personally would like everybody to be there. I think that'd be good and
Yeah.
ideal.
I mean, if we can all be there, like, why not?
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's just like a 15-minute
Of
conversation.
course. Yeah.
Also, Tony, I don't have your phone number. We have a group chat we're making?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I won't have class after 3.
Okay, cool. All right. Liam, you want me to say my number now?
Good.
Okay, 908-456-5812.
Awesome.
That'll be better to me versus email, because I feel like email we get, especially during the weekends, people aren't really checking their emails and it just gets lost in the mix. Yeah, perfect.
All right, I just texted both of you guys.
Okay, I got it.
Good chat.
Oh, did not mean to call you. Sorry, I'm trying to see. Oh my God. Okay, sorry about that.
My dad never looks older than when he's sitting in his recliner watching reruns of Columbo. All right, what are some times?
Okay, so we were saying that we could do Wednesday, any point past 3 o'clock. Well, I could do 3 to like between 3 to 6:30ish.
Okay, it'll probably business time, so probably 3 to 5. What can you do tomorrow?
Tomorrow, what can you guys do tomorrow? I think tomorrow I can.
Free after 12.
Yeah, tomorrow after 12, you said? Oh, okay, well, okay, I could do like between 12 to 3. That works.
Hassan?
I have class, so I have a window between 1:30 and 4:30.
1:30 and 4:30.
So you can do 12 to 1:30?
I can do 1:30 to 4:30, like that time.
Okay, I'll see what she can do tomorrow.
Okay.
Like you said, if only 2 of you can be there, only 2 of you can be there. I mean, that's fine. But again, it'll be recorded, right? So if one of you can't be there, so if Hassan, if they can meet at 1 o'clock, you can certainly get the recording.
Okay. That's
All
fine.
right. You have a chance to really make a big impact on a program that needs the impact. So I'm excited that you want to take this on, and that you'll get a chance to meet Dr. Fenner. So I will set this up. I would suggest emailing and getting together questions that you want to ask her as soon as possible. I would have you do it now, except I need my Zoom because I have class. So otherwise I would just let you do it now, but I need my Zoom because we've got lab starting in a few minutes. So are you guys are in tomorrow's lab? This lab?
This lab.
Okay. All right. You're gonna have a tough time today, but I'll get you through it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.